Hey there coders, welcome to Get Good. Today I want to talk about Agile and why I think it may be ruining your life. Well, I believe that Agile has become somewhat of an anti-pattern over at least the last few years, especially now that most of us are working remotely at least part of the time. And I know that this may trigger some of you, but I truly believe that Agile is one of the most overrated and potentially harmful methodologies in the whole tech industry. It used to be just one way of how a development team could organize themselves, but now it's become this rigid framework that's forced upon you no matter if you're part of a large tech conglomerate, big tech company, or even just part of a small startup. Everyone seems to use it, everyone seems to love it, but is it actually good for you, the developer, or does it just benefit the managers and the stakeholders? I'm gonna share some of my arguments against Agile in this video, and I would like to know in the comments if you agree or if you think that I'm over exaggerating. First off, ever felt like you're on trial during sprint planning? It's supposed to streamline work, but it often feels like a grueling inquisition. Developers are grilled on every task, every hour spent. If they can't explain the value of a task in the heat of the moment, it gets thrown aside. This obviously stifles creativity and innovation, in my opinion, the very soul of software development. Also, many times there is a scrum of scrums or a scrum for managers of different sub-squads, and they decide the 30-day, the 60-day, the 90-day planning, and then when they have decided on what is going to get built, they present it to the developers in the planning meeting. But that's not how it's supposed to be. The developers should be asked what they think should be built next, and the distance between the users and the developers should be reduced to an absolute minimum. If there are too many parties in between the developers and the users, then there's always gonna be this overhead that slows down the progress, slows down the delivery of value to the users. But okay, the most common counter argument to this is that it was even worse before the introduction of Agile, and that back then the decision wasn't even made by a committee, it was often just made by one single person. But it's not just the misuse of Agile that's the problem, it's also the tools it brings along. Just think about Jira, this Frankenstein's monster of Agile. What was supposed to be a tool to streamline work has morphed into this crazy maze of hundreds and hundreds of custom fields. People are writing their own clients to interact with the Jira API, to add like hundreds of custom labels, to aggregate certain issues, to do like bulk operations. It's like a new life form at this point. So new developers, no matter if they join like a large corporation or even a startup, they have to learn how to navigate all of these tools like Jira before they can even think about starting to write a single line of code. And then there is Scrum. Let's take a hard look at Scrum here. It's the poster child of Agile, paraded around like the holy grail of efficiency. But look closer and you'll find it's a straitjacket that chokes creativity. It's rigid, it's inflexible, and it's at odds with the very essence of Agile. Let me explain. It prioritizes processes and tools over individuals and interactions. It values comprehensive documentation over working software. But who's gonna write the code? It's almost as if Scrum was designed to be the exact opposite of what Agile stands for. And it might not have been always the case, but it certainly is in today's tech world. But it's not just what Scrum produces or fails to produce as an outcome, it's also how it's being misused nowadays. Because when the Agile Manifesto got released, the idea was to empower technical people. The idea was to bring along developer hegemony, to bring along developer autonomy, that developer teams can self-organize in an efficient way. It feels like knowing the Agile lingo is a substitute for coding skills nowadays. Could you imagine back in the 80s or 90s that some non-technical people enter an organization and like establish themselves as team members just because they live by Agile, but nobody knows what they really produce? I mean, maybe this sounds crazy to some of you, but it's actually happening. Like in larger corporations, this stuff is happening. Another issue with Agile that remains unmentioned to the best of my knowledge is that Agile in its true form is best suited for small and co-located teams. If you read the Agile Manifesto, it becomes obvious. Nowadays, especially after the pandemic, most teams are distributed. At least they are spread across different locations, but more often than not, they are spread across vastly separate time zones. Trying to fit Agile into such scenarios is like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't work that well, especially if you think about the meeting schedules. If for team member A, the planning meeting starts in the morning, but for team member B, who's been awake for 7 hours already, it's the last event of the workday, it will never be the same for these people. And furthermore, how are they supposed to communicate? The whole idea of Agile is to improve communication between developers, but if you make it as rigid as it often is nowadays in most companies, it actually takes away from the ability and the quality of communication between team members. How are they supposed to make decisions together? It's always going to be biased towards one time zone, one location. All the decisions are going to be made in one location, and everyone who's in the other location will get left behind, will miss important discussions. And that's because the Agile Manifesto was written for small co-located teams. It doesn't work as well as everyone believes it does for remote work. It works even worse if not everyone is remote. We live in this hybrid work environment. Half of the people stay at home, while the other half comes to the office. Next day it's the other way around. Those who were at the office yesterday stay at home today, and so on. And Agile fits these teams the worst. Decisions tend to get made in person. The one half that stayed at home is surprised by decisions. They get surprised in the planning meetings. They have to react in the moment. They have to quickly come up with a response, come up with tasks that they might deem useful to achieve the sprint goals. They hear the plans for the first time because the plans were made in the office, but by chance they were at home working from home that day. Now they hear that some decision has been made during the planning meeting. They have to immediately intervene, or else their interests or their expertise is not going to be considered at all. And then they feel miserable, then they feel left behind, then they feel betrayed. And that's why I said that Agile may be ruining your life. So what's the real solution to all of this? I think that you really have to understand the underlying principles and adapt them to suit your team's needs. Don't take this prescribed flavor of Agile as a certain. Don't apply it blindly. Don't trust your managers. Don't have a rigid meeting schedule. If a meeting is not useful, just cancel it. Just don't even go to that meeting. Be brave. Just skip meetings. Document your decisions. Make your case. Be courageous. You have to be courageous. The whole essence of Agile back then was to be courageous, was to empower developers, was to bring along developer hegemony. Developers nowadays have been forced into this very rigid, very opinionated, standard, one-size-fits-all Agile methodology. But that's, again, the very contrary of what Agile was supposed to bring along. So there you have it. Get rid of unnecessary tools. Cancel most of your meetings. Don't let managers be part of your planning poker or whatever. Just empower yourselves. Become the hegemons that we're supposed to be. We deliver value. We should be able to organize ourselves without the corporate world forcing some kind of methodology upon us that doesn't fit our needs. And now it's your turn. I really wanna hear your Agile experiences in the comments. Share the good, share the bad, share the ugly. I wanna hear it all. I'm gonna reply to every single comment. I really want to know if I'm completely over exaggerating here, or if you can relate to some of the things I've said here. Yeah, and as always, remember to get good, because in tech, it's not enough to just survive. You have to thrive, guys. Thanks for watching, and talk to you next time. Bye bye.